Right. So I want to welcome Don Thomas to the Ethical Predator. Welcome, Don. I'm so happy you could be here.
Yeah, I'm glad to be here. I've been looking forward to this conversation for some time. I had to keep putting it off, and I have to apologize to you. It's just a million things happen at once, but here we are. We finally made it. So I've been looking forward to it, Grant.
Yeah, well, thank you so much. If you folks don't know, Don blessed my book with a foreword, and apart from telling my father that night, with Jerry Gowan's insistence, I'm going to have Jerry on here, but I'm making him wait, a little bit by accident. But yeah, of course, the podcast surrounds I call them the three pillars of the code of traditional archery, which I think some folks take that out of context. I'm not telling them that those are their pillars. It's just what I was built on, being raised in that. It was not it certainly wasn't about success. When I was a kid, there was 3 or 4 large coveys of Hungarians around our place, one of the only places in Ontario that actually had a good huntable population. And I remember I'd run home and I'd call my dad up. He's a school teacher. I'd call him up because I knew he was just done class. And I said, can I get the Churchill out? He still has it. It's a Churchill Aya by Churchill Arms. It's one of their Spanish guns. Side by side, double triggers. Improved modifieds. Can I go get the Churchill out of the safe and take it out? There's Hungarians. I saw them on the field. They busted. I want to get the dog. He say, no, get your bow. And so I did that. I chased Hungarians for a couple of years with a bow. There's a story that goes along with being successful finally, but it's not without losing a lot of arrows. And of course, hunts being hunts, busting far out of range. A young Brittany Spaniel who ran more like a marathon runner too far ahead of me and had no concept of wowing and all that other stuff. But I guess my point is that I was raised that he said, if you want to learn how to hunt, take your bow, because that's what I want you to do. And you can bird hunt with me. We'll get that out of the way. But I guess my first question to you is, with regards to that weapons proficiency piece as one of the first pillars, I guess the thing I saw was my daughter would come to me and show me the latest YouTube guy and shot guru that just pinwheeled a 3D target at 80, 90 yards. So, and she said, well, he did it, and then you talked about people like Howard Hill or people like John Schultz, who my dad had met a couple times, and they can do all this, why, what's the deal? Why are you so, and I said, well, you got to understand, people like John Schultz and Howard Hill are like Kareem Abdul-Jabbar's of basketball. Like, they're not,
Yeah, they shot at a level, that none of us are going to be able to approach. And, I've always taken the position that your range, the critical factor isn't how well you can shoot compared to how some other people can shoot. It's how well you can shoot in a hunting situation. And,
right.
None of us are going to shoot like Howard Hill. I accept that. And the trick is learning your own limits. And
Right.
we have different limits. I don't even think in terms of range and yards. And I'm sure as an instinctive archer, you don't either.
No.
Kind of look at it and know. But with the big step is the willingness to say, no, I am not going to take that shot. It's not right. And that's guided me for a long time now.
Yeah, I think it was the second year I had Indy out. She was still pretty little. She was about 9, and we've been out for a while, and it's in the book. And I said, she was real mad at me. She said, why did you not take the shot on that deer? Like, what was like? And he was very close. It was just that it was kind of what they what they call it, the second rut. A lot of the younger does that hadn't been bred. He was very worked up, and it was such a large deer, and I'm very wary of that swamp. I mean, I've lost an animal in that swamp before, due to both weather and cover, and I wasn't about to do it again. It would just, I had been, my brain just said, don't do it. And I thought the worst thing I could do out here was take an offhand shot at this thing, which was, he wasn't the biggest antler deer, but he was enormous in size. And I thought, he takes off into this, and it could snow overnight tonight. It could, like, all that. She's 9 years old. All these things could happen that were just too many other things other than, and I let him walk, and we watched him go over to a little licking branch that she'd made and work it over. And I realized that she learned more from me not shooting at that deer than she had if I'd dragged her around the woods and had not recovered it, if I'd made a bad shot on it, you know?
Yeah, of course, there's a lot of factors that go into the shoot, no shoot decision making, and range is just one of them. You just alluded to a lot of this. The mood of the animal, you can, with a lot of experience, you can tell when an animal's on wires and ready to jump. Weather, obviously, there are shots that I will take if I have good tracking snow, and are better air quote shots that I'll pass up if I think we may get snow that night. And I used to live in Alaska, and I've done a lot of hunting there. And black bears on the beaches, they're going to go into the nastiest stuff around. And I passed up shots, much as you just described, because I know what they're going to do, even with a well placed arrow. And there'll be another one. You don't have to take every shot that presents.
Yeah. Yeah, it's funny you said that, because it's I think that whole driver behind the initial podcast, the lessons learned thing, was important, and that's what I've always appreciated from your writing as well, because it's educational. It's not just fact based. It's almost like there's that adventure part of it, but it's based around a sense of reality. Whereas a lot of, I see some of the current, both script as well as, I guess you could say, mediums of media are all about the largest, biggest, and it sort of centers around that. So I guess that leads me to my next question for you. How do you feel about the ethics currently, in the state of ethics now?
Well,
Surrounding.
that's a really, really big question, obviously, and there's no quick answer to that.
Mm,
Um, it sort of depends on the milieu you're operating in. As traditional bow hunters, we tend, and I don't mean to offend people who do not choose to hunt with traditional bows, but I think that traditional bow hunters in general tend to be a little bit more aware of ethics than perhaps some other hunting groups. And again, I'm painting with a broad brush, and obviously there are ethical hunters who hunt with compounds. There's ethical hunters who hunt with rifles, but I think just traditional bow hunters as a group are maybe a little bit more obsessed with it.
right.
And a lot of our organizations, I belong to probably more than I need to, but Professional Bow Hunter Society, for example, is a good example where, you go to one of their biannual meetings and you're surrounded by people who just have high ethics. They're perfectly willing to pass up marginal shots, and they're thinking about it and talking about it.
Yeah.
The conversation around the dinner table there isn't how big whatever you shot this year was. It kind of segues easily into the kind of thing we're talking about. And
Mhm.
I've always tried to de-emphasize the trophy value. And I've shot some big animals. There's no secret about that. But to reduce a hunt to a number of inches, to me, is missing the whole point, and cheating yourself if you choose to take that route.
Yeah, 100%. I think it's funny. When I was a kid, I got known to be pretty good at recovering animals, just because I knew a lot of the bush that the local, the guys were driving for deer in the gun hunts. I knew it because I bird hunted the living heck out of it. I just, and I had permission to bird hunt. They're like, no, don't go in there in the gun season. But, for rough grouse or Hungarians, I was all over those properties. And it always amazed me that there was, that in some cases the deer had not gone very far. There just was not that ability to, um, if it didn't go down, they didn't hit it, so to speak.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
it,
unfortunately, I've seen my share of that. And you bring up an interesting point. I learn an awful lot about bow hunting when I'm not bow hunting. Uh, Bird hunting, for example. For years we had a place in southern Arizona. We spent our winters to get away from Montana winters, and basically I was there to hunt quail. And I also did a lot of cows deer hunting while I was there. And I found my cow's deer spots while I was following my wire hairs with my shotgun. You know, I was just covering all kinds of ground. All of a sudden, you go, oh, wait a minute, look at this. There's tracks here. Whoa, there's a little trickle of water there. So I think aware bow hunters are always, even if it's in the back of their mind, when they're doing secondary things, they're thinking about bow hunting and thinking about the habitat, which is the key. You know, as we both know, that's the key to the highway.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's amazing. I think for me, you know, when I just tried to define what I was writing about, which was the three pillars around it, the weapons proficiency, the ethics. I really thought back to where the hunter safety course went. I used to teach just the bow hunter education part, which wasn't a big requirement. This is when I was quite a lot younger, in my early 20s. And my daughter, my son had done it several years ago. He's now 20, so 7 years ago he did it, seven, maybe eight, maybe more than that, because he did the apprentice thing. But I noticed that the ethics part of the test questions themselves had really dropped. And even more so now, Indy just did it a year and a half ago to get her license, my 12-year-old, and there was hardly any on that. She showed me the bank. She went and wrote it herself, little fart, without any guidance while I was at work one day. But my point is that they'd even dropped even more so. And we just ran our first traditional bow hunting boot camp, and you know, we had one fellow on there from that teaches in Michigan, and he was saying it's amazing how many younger people that he has come out, and he said they're so, to use a word, influenced by those television shows or what. There's that it's so social media driven, or you know, that's where they're getting their ethics from, if you could call it that. He said in some cases, because it's, you know, they're like, you know, well, you know, I've got my bow dialed in at 70 yards, and like I wanted to point out, I too am not criticizing the weapons platform. I'm not, but it's the use of it I see from time to time, especially, I think, that really gets me more so than, you know.
Well, this is a personal opinion, and of course, I'm a writer. That's the medium, and a photographer. But I
Yeah,
really am skeptical about the social media and a lot of the online content, because it skips through so much important stuff just to get to a grab and grin hero picture.
right.
And that's one thing I am concerned about. You asked me whether I thought the ethical environment was getting better or worse, and my big concern is simply, you know, I saw it on the internet, so it's true.
Yeah,
And to become a social influencer, uh, and I'm sure that there are ethical people who do that, but the easiest way to become one is to talk a lot about things you don't know about and have lots of pictures of dead animals in the bow hunting world. And I think
yeah,
that's a shortcut, and I think that's going to bite us before it's over.
yeah. Yeah, I've got to agree there. I like how you put that. For certain, I got banned from one group for making a comment because I didn't. Obviously, I was criticizing the shot, and it was a black bear frontal shot, and the bear got hit and turned and fell down the probably 70-meter drop. And I said, you know, I did the fall take that bear's life or the arrow take it.
Mm-hmm.
Just my point was, regardless if the animal expired quickly, you just influenced, so to speak, instead of being. I like how Brian Burkhart put it to me. He said we need more ambassadors and less influencers. I
Mm-hmm.
like, and I, that's what I'm striving to do, because I see this and I wanted to challenge at least some of the people, even if it was a lower percentage, on based around that video of this bear. You know, just really got me that there was 35 some thousand likes about this guy's shot,
Mm-hmm.
regardless of what had happened. And I mean, as you are well aware, you know, a bear is a different creature than a whitetail at the best
Oh,
of times.
very much so. They're tough. They're
And
tough.
I mean, I think the thing that discouraged me for a few years from hunting bear was a fella that had been told by his guide several times not to take a certain shot.
Mm-hmm.
And these were baited bear hunts, and he took a shot one night, and it was a bear reaching up for a bait, for the bait
Mm-hmm.
behind. and he clipped a piece of that bear's spine into the back end of it in the paunch. And I mean, you know, it was a day before we recovered that animal, almost. And
Well, you know, of course I precede social media. I'm old, and when I started, there was no social media, but there were bow hunting videos. And there are some good bow hunting videos. I don't mean to paint everybody with this brush, but I've seen some popular bow hunting videos that involve taking just awful shots.
right,
I mean,
yeah,
you wouldn't dream in a million years of taking that shot. And if they get lucky and the animal goes down, everybody's high-fiving and stuff like that. And that's what younger people and new bow hunters were seeing. And if you make that acceptable, which you do, if you put it on a video and market the video, you're saying this is acceptable.
yeah,
And I saw a lot of things that just weren't acceptable. And,
yeah,
you know, writers aren't immune. There certainly are writers who are guilty of the same sin. I certainly try not to be. And I'm
mhm,
not perfect. And I have messed up a few times, but I've been honest about it. There are
yeah,
very few shots that I've taken that I regretted taking. Very, very, very few. But in the case of a bad hit, I say, well, this is what happened, and here's what I did wrong. Fortunately, I've lost very, very few animals, and I've been at this a long time. But and I always make the point, it's not because I'm a brilliant archer, it's because I'm very conservative in my shots. I take easy shots, you know, and that's you can you call that loading the dice if you want, but I think that's the right way to go.
yeah. I had a fella last month ask me, you must be such a great shot. And I said, well, if I tell you I'm a bad shot, you'll think I'm lying. If I brag, then you'll accuse me of bragging. But in the last, probably the last 20 years, I said to him, I've really gotten, I guess conservative is the best way to say it, about when I'm going to shoot. I've really gotten extremely careful about when. And so when I do, I said I'm fairly certain at that point. So you know, in my younger years, when we've had it, you might see one or two deer a year in Ontario with our winters we had back then.
Mhm.
And, you know, it's certainly sobering. You know, those gun hunters I tracked those deer for, they just didn't have the knowledge. But guess what? Within 3 or 4 years of helping that one crew out, and they were a big crew, they had about almost 2,000 acres to hunt and push. Within 3 or 4 years, they started stand hunting. They figured out tree stands because I talked to them, and I'd recovered animals for them. And in a lot of cases, the animals weren't spoiled. They'd call me and say, "Hey, we can't find something. You want to come look?" I'm like, "Well, there's only one or two places going to be here. It's going to be either here or here. What happened and how did it?" And so I learned a lot. And it's funny, they had more fun deer hunting. The old fella that's no longer with us, he said to me the year before he passed away, he said, "I've had more fun watching animals in the last few years hunting this way than I did driving them."
Yeah, you
Um,
don't learn much about animals driving them. I mean, you've immediately created an artificial situation, and it's a blur, it's a glimpse. And one of the great things about bow hunting is the amount of time you get to spend observing wildlife being wildlife, even if you don't kill it. You know, I think that's a huge plus. And I don't, you know, I grew up in a very outdoor oriented family. My father was a superb outdoorsman, and my mother was hunted too.
right,
He never picked up bow hunting. He grew up very poor in Depression area, Texas, and he hunted for dinner. He
right.
was an excellent, excellent shot, excellent rifleman, never picked up the bow. And I'm saying that just because I'm not disparaging all rifle hunters, but
Yeah,
bow hunters learn how to track. You know, you have to.
yeah,
And a lot of rifle hunters are just terrible about it. And it's because they've never been thrust into the situation of having to learn how to track. I was hunting whitetails in the snow up here years ago, and I came across, I said, geez, that's a drop of blood. And I followed it a little bit and I followed it a little bit. And I wound up following this for a long time. And it was a whitetail. And I followed it long enough so I could convince myself it was not mortally wounded. I got back down to the road and a guy came up, and, you know, the usual I've seen much. This is during rifle season. He
yeah,
said, "Yeah, I shot at one up at the hill." And I said, "Well, what happened?" He said, I didn't hit it. You can tell when you hit him. He hadn't even gone up and looked, and it was obviously from where he was pointing where this deer was. This was the deer he'd hit. And, you know, I'm not disparaging rifle hunters, but you know, if you hunt with the bow, you have to learn how to follow up shots. That's just an inherent part of the game. I think it's one of the most exciting parts of the game. My
Mm,
wife Lori is really, really good at it. She's very, very meticulous. And
right.
I've done a lot of tracking. You know, I've hunted with the San, the Bushmen and the Kalahari, who are just off the charts. I mean, their tracking abilities are absolutely unbelievable. And I'm never going to be able to track like them, but patience and determination, you know, can get you a long way on a wounded animal. And I've lost very, very few over the years. I can think of one or two, and I don't like to think about them, but
Mm,
um, you know, that's something that needs to be emphasized more, no matter what you're hunting with. And unfortunately, this is the problem with video and social media.
yeah.
How many videos have you seen of somebody crawling on their hands and knees through a swamp for 6 hours, you know, following a wounded deer? That's not what gets you on social media.
Dave Tetzlaff remarked, and I don't mean to bring up my book again. I'm not doing a shameless plug, but when I talked to Dave Tetzlaff a couple weeks ago, he said what really it was that piece of how, you know, it was 2.5 days you went after that deer in the book, you know, and it's I call that chapter the inevitable.
Mhm.
Um, you know, and reconciling the inner hunter because it's not over, you know, at all until that animal's found or recovered somehow. And I remember my father having only a few days at times when I was a kid in amongst the school year, and we had only one archery only area that was open for 2 or 3 weeks, maybe a couple weeks, archery only. And I remember him as a kid dropping everything to help somebody on a track, days of his hunting to help other folks track. And I said to him one night, we are driving out and we'd find this guy's buck. And he said, I said, are we going to be able to go out tomorrow? And he goes, no, I've got to go back to work. We'll be out next weekend for the final weekend. And I was mad. And he
Mhm.
stopped the truck and he said, there's one less deer that isn't going to be recovered in there. And you helped me find it. So thanks. That was that's how he said, thanks for being there with me.
Well, that's admirable. I mean, that's ethics in action right there. That kind of determination. I've been in similar situations. I'll help anybody track a deer or an elk or whatever it is. And yeah, you know, I have bow hunting friends, and I'll occasionally get a call and say, "Hey, I got a tough one." And you know, I think that's an I would get just as much satisfaction at helping somebody else recover an animal as I would shooting it myself. You know, it's a mystery. It's just like any mystery. You have clues and you make observations. You become Sherlock Holmes. And you went, okay, he didn't do that, so he must have done that. Hunting mountain lions is a great example of that because it's all tracking. When I hunted, don't get me started, but you know, a lot of mountain lion hunting now is done with snow machines and tracking collars. We never did any of that. Find the lion track, kick the dogs out, and take off.
Right.
And might have a line up a tree in 200 yards. You might be walking out of the snowy woods at 2 o'clock in the morning,
Right.
and following a track. It's, you know, our snow conditions are highly variable here, which is why we don't have a lot of outfitters. And a lot of times you'd have snow, then no snow, and you had to circle and pick up the. You know, that to me was much more fun than shooting a lion.
Right.
I don't know how many I treed. I personally only shot a couple of them, but I love the line hunting. The tracking was the fun part of it, to be honest with you, and the dogs, and
Right.
shooting lions. You know, usually I was with somebody who'd never done it before, and they were excited, and that was fine. I didn't care, but the fun part of it was the tracking and working with the dogs.
Yeah. I've noticed a common theme from reading you for a long time. I'm going to be straight up from articles to books. The common theme, and this is one of the things that connected in my book, was the conservation and stewardship that goes along with every theme, whether it's bird dogs, fly fishing, or bow hunting.
Mhm.
And those things, it reminded me of, you know, that older part of that appreciation or sense of that environment that is really prevalent in all your writing. And that's one of that was actually one of the pillars, the last one I really wanted to impact with folks. I talked to a fella a couple weeks ago about an area here. one of the last areas we've got actual wild ringnecks in Ontario. And of course, it borders Lake Ontario, which gets lake effects. It's warmer and they don't have the snowpack, and there's lots of cattails and riparian habitat there. And I was trying to explain to him how if he went into the Don Valley of Toronto itself to the Humber River and followed that up, because he still has fishes up through there for the runs from Lake Ontario. I said, you go in there in the springtime in an early morning, where away from those houses that can't be built in that ravine because of the structure, into the edge of those swamps that river runs through. You fish through there and you'll hear roosters crowing in the spring and fighting. They're still in there because it's so messy and they haven't been pushed out. And he couldn't believe it. He said, he went back, he said, you're right, I put out 3 or 4 great big roosters. I'm like, they're all over the golf course cover out there too, on the other side of that golf course, that you can follow that into the river and fish all the way through there for browns and the upper reaches. And it's funny though, I was trying to talk to him about habitat. So I'd love to get your thoughts before I digress any further, about that conservation and stewardship that goes along with being a hunter, understanding that environment. Because I see that as a theme in everything I've ever read about yours, right from entomology and reading the water in a stream and understanding that, that fish's habitats right through to bird dogs and bow hunting.
Well, that's really the interesting part of the outdoors. And whether you hunt or not, let's face it, the habitat is everything. That's what makes us the way we are. That's what makes North America unique around the world, is that we have all this wonderful habitat, and we're keeping it. We could do a better job, but there's still a lot of native wild country here. And being in the wild, to me, in a lot of ways, I like to think of hunting and fishing as an excuse to be there. Not to harp on mountain lion hunting, but during the rifle elk season, those mountains are full of people, which is fine. Public land, I'm glad they're there. But in January, there isn't anybody there, and you can walk for miles and miles and miles and not see a trace of a human being.
Right.
And that was one of the things I love the most about lion hunting. And you're talking about pheasants. Of course, pheasants love nasty cover above all other game birds. Pheasants do that. One of my trophies, again, air quotes, I love late season pheasants. We have a 4-month pheasant season here, and we have good pheasant hunting. Opening weekend, it's really not much to go out and shoot 3 pheasants. But by into December, those birds are wild. They're smart. The young ones have been shot, and the big old roosters are in the nastiest, icy, snowy mess you can imagine. And to me, shooting a couple of those birds is like shooting a huge bull elk. I mean, you earn them, and your dogs helped you earn them, so they get extra chow. I just fed my wire hair. He put in a lot of miles today. Sorry to get we're supposed to talk about bow hunting. We're talking about dogs, but I guess it's all part of the same thing, isn't it?
I think so. I've learned more about trying to cut game off from the dogs. We have about a 2-year-old wine. She's about 80 pounds. And then we have her older sister, who's a little smaller. She's about 60, 65 pounds. They're in the crate up there together. They just had their big retrieving swim for the night earlier there to keep them quiet. But yeah, I think the dog thing is a big deal, because that speaks to me about conservation and stewardship right there. And I remember the article you wrote about bow hunting for ducks in the winter.
I was going to congratulate you earlier for shooting a hun with a bow. I mean, ducks, if you do it right and you know your ducks and you got a good decoy spread, that's reasonable. Huns, that's tough.
Y'all got the hun for me that wasn't quite.
Okay, I got it. You're fessing up. That's good.
Time I hunted Hungarian partridge with a bow, and it actually wasn't the one I was trying to get. So it was
okay.
Bird. So there's a lot of other things behind those stories I'm probably going to tell on another podcast someday. But I remember, like, when I was a kid, I used to wake my dad up on Sundays because we stay out of firearm closures on Sundays here. They're open now, but I would wake my dad up because none of the swamps they were all open. No one was there on Sundays.
Oh yeah.
Wake him up because he promised me, and my mom's like, I heard my mom, where are you going? It's Sunday.
Yeah.
To go duck hunt. With what? His bow. I can hear him like this.
Well, good for you. I salute you for that. You know, it's a funny thing. Again, nothing against rifle hunting. My dad was a rifle hunter, and I enjoyed hunting with him when I was a kid.
Yeah.
But I just have I haven't shot a big game animal with a rifle in I don't know 60 years. It wouldn't occur to me to do that. If a world record something stepped out there, I wouldn't shoot it. Birds are different. I love hunting ducks and upland game with my shotgun,
Yeah.
and that's just kind of the way it is. It's just different. You know, I coincidentally was hunting huns today, and you know they're challenging, and I just had this feeling I'm doing this just the right way. I have a young dog and an experienced dog and the shotgun, and
Yeah.
I don't know. It's funny. It's I'm contrasting that to my feelings about firearms for big game. People want to hunt with a rifle, that's fine with me, but uh, no, I'm a bow hunter for big game, but I'm a shotgun hunter with birds and ducks.
Oh, well, in the book, I talk about pheasant hunting simply because two of the properties, I still have permission to hunt one. It's a bit of a drive. There's a no firearms discharge. You can use a bow all you want.
Mm,
They'll allow you to use a bow in that area. Just no one does, right?
mm,
That
sure.
one area, the second area is the one. It's actually a chapter in the book, and it's now completely. I mean, that was one of the last cold water streams in that area that had native brook trout in it, and it's now been bulldozed under, and it's all
Wow.
and I say it in the end of the story. I say, that is now a housing complex, and the stream is now a septic, drainage, and the dog's gone as well. It's sort of that memory that of those things that are embedded in you with ethics, and conservation and stewardship and all that. And that was a huge thing for me. I mean, I remember coming home that day. I was a lot older. My parents' property was on the way home. They have an old renovated period stone house from 1837 that they
Wow.
renovated years ago and moved into. And it was an officer's house from the War of 1812. It was part of his pay, when the war ended. And I dropped in at their place, and my dad said, "How many birds did you get?" Or no, what did you get other than a cold rear end and a hungry gut? Because that's what his dad used to always say. And I go, I got a couple birds. I actually did. How many arrows did you lose? I said, "Oh, I lost 3 or 4 arrows."
Yeah. Yeah.
And but I said I did, and I said I'm going to go back actually and find a couple, but I said, I did get a couple of birds, but it was a real awakening for me because I had to really restrain myself from shooting because of the dog.
Mm-hmm.
Well, for folks that don't know, pheasants are notorious runners. They're notorious. They'll get a dog to break a lot, even a good dog, I mean, I've had mine do that. But yeah, I think that dog thing goes hand in hand because, you know, uh, recovery of birds. There's been a bunch of pheasants that I would have never have found that I can think of.
No, I don't think you should hunt pheasants without a dog. I certainly don't think you should hunt waterfowl without a dog. You know, I just went off about not shooting birds with a bow, but that's so what are you talking about? I've shot lots of grouse with a bow, not on the wing, but out elk hunting. I've fed camps with ptarmigan and spruce grouse in Alaska. And then
Yeah,
there's turkeys, which are one of my absolute favorite bow hunting targets. I've had a good record with turkeys. I've probably killed a couple of dozen turkeys with traditional bows. And I think that of all the things we hunt, the difference in degree of difficulty between bows and firearms is probably greater for turkeys than anything else. They're so tough. Fortunately, I live in a place with a lot of turkeys. I have them around. I love bow hunting turkeys. Yeah, actually, if you read what I write, I probably write too much about bow hunting turkeys. That's one of the few things I kill almost every year because they're easy to pack out of the woods and they're good to eat.
sure.
And it's calling, no matter what you're hunting, calling it game in, whether it's a turkey or an elk or a moose or rattling for whitetails, is one of the most exciting things, most exciting means of hunting that I've ever experienced.
Yeah,
Um, all of a sudden you're talking to this thing, and then you realize it's getting closer, and then you've got a bull elk in your lap, or rattling in a whitetail during the rut. And you hear the smartest animals in the woods, and it's so counterintuitive because you're so used to being quiet when you're bow hunting, and all of a sudden you're going, and all of a sudden this thing starts running at you from 200 yards away. I've had that happen. I've had it happen in Canada. I rattled a big whitetail all the way across this open field and killed it eventually. And you know, that interaction, and with moose sometimes that interaction goes on for hours. They're
Right.
they're very, very cautious. Well, you have a great moose hunting tradition in Eastern Canada,
Yeah.
and you know, it's, and all of a sudden you hear you've got them.
The,
Here
the
you
br-
go.
yeah. The grunt. Yeah.
Yep, that
Yeah.
wasn't very good.
Funny because turkeys are my favorite thing to hunt now.
How
Hunting them.
many? What's your turkey population like in Ontario now?
Good. We got a pretty good population. We've really, I was part of, I wasn't part of it really. I did habitat assessments for the biologists in my area. I did about 8 of their 9 of them. And we would look for that riparian part, the water. We would look for the roosting trees and then the feeding areas. And then you would notate it. And so I saw a few of the releases that we did here. And our population is really strong now. We've got probably in almost, except some of the northern ones, and the turkeys are moving up there in every wildlife management, you've got a season. The only thing I don't, they allow 1 month archery season in the fall here. It starts on the 1st of October. Do allow hens to be taken in the fall as well. And I can see, I guess I can see why, but then of course I was with pheasants forever for quite a long time. And of course, in a lot of the areas I hunt, it was roosters only because of that. And I tried to explain to a few folks that you can't compare a doe tag to a hen turkey. It's not the same thing in an avian species quite as much. So, you know, without giving my opinion about the whole biological part of that whole thing and birds, our flocks are doing very well. I've been pretty successful with traditional bow here. I stopped shotgun hunting them quite a long time ago. And that's how I got my kids hooked because they came out with me and there was that feedback from the bird.
Oh yeah, I took my kids turkey hunting with me quite a bit when they were little. We were talking about habitat issues. Turkeys are one of our great success stories. I'm sure you know this, but I spent my early childhood in upstate New York. Nothing to do with New York City. It was actually a very rural area. My dad shot a deer every year. There were 0 turkeys there. It wasn't just that they didn't have a season; they weren't there.
Right.
And that county is now one of the leading turkey producing counties in the eastern seaboard. Turkeys were not native to Montana.
Huh.
Well, I think, and I can see from my deck the site of the first turkey release, which is in 1953 in Montana. I think the issue was they couldn't make it through our winters until agriculture. And now, you know, with feedlots, when cows are feeding, turkeys can congregate in there in the winter. They've got some open ground they can pick through and get through the winter. And our turkey population is really in excellent shape. Of course, it varies depending on spring hatch success, depending on weather, one thing or another. But historically, there were no turkeys here, and now we've got a lot of turkeys. I'm glad to hear that because I didn't know about Eastern Canada. I know they exploded in Northern New York, and that's a success story, you know.
We've probably got fluctuating anywhere between 70 and 90,000 birds in the province.
Whoa, that's a lot of birds. Where are you geographically in Ontario?
In Ontario, we're closer to Ottawa. I hunt primarily Lanark.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm down in that area there. I've got spots to hunt for pheasants closer to the lakes, of course, and southern Ontario and down all the way down through I guess closer to the other side of Michigan. There's birds all up through the Port Colborne area, which is where my family was originally from, that area of Ontario. But
I have some historical ties to Eastern Canada. When I was a kid in upstate New York, we would go up and make long canoe trips through Algonquin almost every summer. That was one of our big things. And I fell in love with that. And I did my medical internship in Montreal. And of course,
right.
Quebec. Oh, yeah, Quebec's a huge hunting state. I used to take off from the emergency room and go out and shoot some ducks and then try to get back for my next emergency room shift. And I had a great time. Yeah, I really did.
That's amazing. That's fantastic. Yeah, I think for me, I was lucky as a kid because I was born into a fishing family and fly fishing and hunting family. And of course, my grandfather's best friend that he met when he was a conservation officer in Meaford, Ontario, was David Reed, and he was trained in the Carmichael rod building. He'd been trained by all of those guys in split cane rod building.
Oh, that's an art. That's an
Yeah,
art.
Dave Reed had made split canes custom for people for years. My dad still has 3 of his rods. I have 1. My dad has an incredibly beautiful 10-foot 7/8 weight salmon rod he built,
Oh yeah, classic.
and it's
To spay, two-handed.
it's got a fighting butt actually, I think, on it. I believe it's got a fighting butt.
I've never mastered spays, and that became a big thing, 10 or 15 years ago. You can't teach an old dog new tricks, and I've been double hauling so long, I just can't do it. And my fly fishing interests, I grew up catching little brook trout in northern New York, and it's a wonderful thing to do. And we have a good spring creek right down the road.
Right.
But my last years, I just got so interested in steelhead. Actually, before I went to Alaska, because I grew up in the Pacific Northwest, I've been so obsessed with steelhead and saltwater. I do a lot of saltwater fly fishing right now. And I've got some beautiful split cane rods that I haven't taken out of the case in 15 or 20 years because, in saltwater you need to be able to drive a fly a long way into a wind. But yeah, it's funny how many bow hunters are also fly fishermen.
I found that.
Yeah, there's a connection there. I think it's a lot of the same thing. Well, I'd rather do it the hard way than catch a lot of fish. And that's a big thing. And a lot of bow hunters are wing shooters too. I guess that they all go together.
Oh yeah, very true. Yeah. Yeah, my son and I we were fishing for sea run brook trout and PEI. My mother was from Summerside in PEI, so we'd go down every year as a kid there. And of course, my brother would take off to the beach with my mom, and my dad and I would hit the Morel River for sea run brook trout. I had taken my son back several years ago, and we were fishing about a quarter of a mile from the sea. And I said, look, in an hour, the tide's going to start coming in, and we're going to have to get out of this pool because we're not going to be able to stand in this pool. And he said, that guy up on the bridge, Dad, he's saying that rod you've got's a cheap piece of junk or something like that. There was something make sense about. And I said, well, let me tell you something. I got in the truck with him. I said, I've had these red ball waders for 25 years. They're just, and I said, that rod that you see, my dad built me when I was 10 years old.
Oh yeah.
Using it today because I used it on this stream when I was a kid.
Of course, sense of history, absolutely tradition.
I used to have my buddies criticizing for what's behind me, that old Damon Howt Nom up there that I shot for 18 years. And I just shot it really well. And yeah, it stacked at my draw length at the end, but I could shoot it. I could just like I can shoot that old Fenwick glass rod that he built me when I was a kid. I broken the tip off of it now 4 or 5 times since I was 9.
My archery equipment choices have evolved or devolved dramatically. For years, my standard hunting bows were 70 to 74 pounds. Don't ask me why. I didn't need that. Yeah. And then when I started guiding buffalo hunters in Australia, I actually worked my way up to like 85. Wow. And of course, my shoulder blew up, and I've got all 70-pound bows out there I can't pull. I'm hunting with a 48-pound bow now, and I'm slowly donating those old bows to bow hunting banquet affairs because I know I'll never pull them again. And what I've learned is I didn't need them in the first place. Accuracy, I could shoot them accurately. It wasn't that I was not accurate with them, but it was not worth the wear and tear on my shoulder. I know that's what made my shoulder blow up. There's no doubt about it. And so I'm down to 48 now. And, it kills things dead if you put the arrow in the right place.
Yeah, my dad, his big passion is ASLs. And I remember when I was very young, him and his buddy went down and they each bought a Big 5, a Schultz made Big 5 at that time, back in the mid 70s. And it was 75 pounds. I was terrified of that bow. I remember I'd pick that thing up and hold it. And he's left-handed. So I'd pick that thing up and I'd be like, I couldn't string. And I don't know if that was part of why I never picked up longbows. I've always stayed recurve my entire life, but I've always been intimidated by that whole thing.
back and forth between longbows and recurves is interesting, because the first traditional bows I shot were all longbows, and I hunted with them for years. And I've never shot better than I did then, because I just love shooting it. I come home from work and go shoot 100 arrows, and then I started traveling so much, and traveling with through the airlines with a longbow is a pain. And at that time, I never found a takedown longbow that I liked. They just didn't feel like longbows. So I kind of went to recurves, and I loved hunting with my longbows. And I still take one out and hunt whitetails with it every once in a while. I never shot better than when I did with those longbows, and sometimes I wish I'd gone back. But I did all this worldwide traveling, and which I really enjoyed this year. I'm still doing it. We were in Australia, and then we were in Zimbabwe, and it just is not practical to take a one-piece longbow through the airline systems of the world. It just doesn't work.
Yeah. Yeah, Josh, the new owner of Damon Howt, I've kind of started when we first talked almost a year ago, because that's all I've always stuck with Damon Howt. I don't know why. Just whether it's a good luck thing for my brain or whatever it was. And I said, if you made a takedown hunter, I my mind.
Yeah.
I'm like, yeah, I've actually, and I said I talked to a couple of the old timers from Howat years ago. I said when I was a kid in my early 20s, if you ever make a takedown hunter. So apparently that's in the works. So I don't know. I'm not going to take credit for it, but
I've shot all kinds of bows, but for the last 40 years, I've shot Dick Robertson's bows almost exclusively. And,
yeah,
they're wonderful bows. They're not only are they artistic, but they just perform well. And I've never chronographed an arrow in my life. I have no idea. And I'm not much of a gearhead either. I don't calculate FOC. And with all due respect to the Ashby data, as a scientist, you think, hey, Thomas ought to be all up on this. This is science, controlled studies and all that.
yeah.
It just never rang my bell. I can't imagine a bunch of Indians sitting around a fire, napping points and going, well, let's check the FOC on it. I mean,
I was
really?
raised by an anthropologist. My dad was an anthropological. That's what he had originally studied for years. So
Really?
I was raised picking up that. And I remember watching him and his buddies take, black bear and moose here in Northern Ontario with 55 to 65 pound recurves and longbows and bear razor heads, Howard
Oh,
Hill
yeah.
broadheads or Zwickey Eskimos, because that's all there was when I was a kid.
Yeah, I didn't have a lot of choice. Yeah,
Yeah.
we had a great old guy out here, ran a ranch out here, and he did a lot of bow hunting. He was kind of a funny guy. And one day he said, I'm quitting. Here, you can have my stuff. And I've got a bushel of old razor heads out there. He just gave them to me, and I, give them here and give them there. And I hunt with them sometimes too. They're not actually my absolute favorite, but they're
Yeah.
great. They're a great old broadhead, and I've killed a lot of animals with them.
Yeah. That's
I've
awesome.
got plenty of them. If you need some, I'll send you some. I mean,
I
literally.
was a bad kid. I would pilfer my uncle Bruce. He probably wondered where a lot of his bear greenies went. I would grab those. And you know what? Because I rabbit hunted a lot of snowshoe rabbit hunting when I was a kid. Because I was
Yeah.
allowed, it was open right through the winter.
Oh yeah.
And I would go out and first thing in the morning on a Sunday, and I was gone for the whole day. There's a lot of bear razor heads, Don, around the town I lived in as a kid, stuck in
Yeah,
like,
I stuck in trees and roots and tops
so
of trees.
I'm sure that they off. I told my daughter every time we drive by there on the way home from my folks, I'll pile through there and grab her a treat or something through the coffee shop. And I say, I always wonder what they did when they made that housing complex. If they ever found all of these arrows, because I drew all sorts of stuff on them and all sorts of things. I often wonder what they thought, of those things. But I think I was lucky because my father's approach to was very similar to a lot of what you've written about. It was very similar to that understanding as a whole part in the whole process you're involved in.
Mhm.
And I mean, I met Fred Aspel when I was very young, and I've talked about this a few times already. So if I'm being redundant for other people,
Yeah.
I redundant. But I remember him shooting. He would get up in the morning before everybody, and he would shoot every freaking morning before he went into the bear stand.
Yep. Yep.
I remember coming out. Of course, back then it was the 70s. I didn't know who this was. I wanted everyone to get up so I get permission to go brook trout hunt the beaver ponds nearby because
Right.
I wasn't allowed anywhere near the bear hunting. And like I said to him one day, "Why are you up so early all the time?" He said, "Well, I'm shooting." do you have a bow? I go, yeah, it's in my dad's truck. We'll go get it. It was a little Browning Apache, a little 25 brown, green glass Browning Apache recurve. And I asked him one day, and this is all about this whole shot thing and arrows and tech. And I'm not a techie person either. I'm just not. And I asked him, I said, well, what do you think of my shooting? And he didn't even look at me. He said, just keep shooting, kid. Like,
That was a
you know,
polite way to put it. Yeah. Yeah,
and I
I know.
camp for these folks down here that are getting into it. And one guy was a wheelbow hunter. There's a couple guys hadn't done it before. And they're like, what is your real advice on shooting? I just keep shooting.
Yeah.
I can't,
Shooting.
it's a, yeah.
And that's something, when you get into traditional archery and bow hunting, if you're shooting at targets, it doesn't matter. But when there's live animals on the other end, of course, it's critical.
Right.
And you have to maintain your skills. I'm actually bad about it. And Fred was really good about that. And we talked about that. And he did. He'd get out and shoot every day.
Yeah.
I am bad about it because in hunting season, I'm busy hunting. And by the time whitetail season is here, there's snow all over the ground.
Right.
And I don't like losing arrows. So I shoot less during hunting season than I do at any other time of the year.
Yeah.
And I think that's a fault. I should correct that. But I do know Fred was very good about that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, you're talking about losing your razor heads, and Dave Tetzloff in Florida, and we have many mutual friends in Florida. I used to go down there every year and hunt with Don Davis, who's a wonderful, wonderful bow hunter from Melbourne, Florida. And they had a big hunting camp, and we were sitting around one night, and all of a sudden there was a raccoon ran up this tree, and they wanted to get rid of the raccoons because they were.
Yeah.
One night we had a cut up pig in a cooler, and the raccoon figured out how to open it. They ate all this pork we were anyway. They wanted this raccoon dead, so they said, okay. So I got my bow, and everything was safe. There was nothing behind it. Whack, right in this limb up in the top of this tree, and it just stuck, and it stayed there. And for years, everybody who came through that camp, Don Davis would say, that's Don Thomas's arrow there. Jeez. I'm never going to live it down.
Yeah. Oh, wow. That's amazing.
I think it finally fell out. I was glad to see it gone.
Yeah. 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 My dad had a buddy of his that he bought those longbows with, and he hunted with longbow. And I remember him shooting at this big buck one day, 3 arrows off the side of this road, and the deer would move and he'd shoot and miss, shoot and miss. Gosh. And I said, Daddy, my favorite, I still shoot them, whereas the Zwickey Deltas, just because I've stuck with those for years too. And he went back to his truck. I thought he was going to get some free broadheads, and he took an axe out, and I thought, oh, he's going to get the broadheads after all. And he pounded them into the trees.
Oh, so nobody would see him.
Yeah, I went back for 3 weeks. I never told my parents. I don't think I've ever told my parents this. I went back with every instrument imaginable, trying to get those out of those trees as a kid.
Good luck. Good luck.
No, they were done. They were in these pines. So yeah, they were super.
The trouble is, we were talking about shooting grouse and everything in trees, and the problem is, if you're going to shoot at something you want to kill it, you better use a broadhead.
Yeah.
I heard we were floating a river up in Alaska, and we wanted some spruce grouse, and I had a blunt, and I said, okay, I'll use this blunt, and pinwheel this bird and watch it fly off shish kebabbed. And so if I'm shooting something I want to kill, I don't care whether it's a backyard rabbit or anything.
Sure.
I've got a pocket of old broadheads that I use for that. Even I don't do much bow fishing, but occasionally I'll go shoot carp, and I like to shoot my broadheads.
Yeah.
Sometimes you got to do a lot of splashing around to get your fish, but what are you going to do with a carp anyway?
Yeah. Yeah. Great point. Well, thank you so much for taking the time out of your schedule to be on the Ethical Predator. I'm really, for all the effort, I hope that some of the newer people coming up, and I told my daughter this, I said, how many people at your high school in Ottawa, in the capital of here, how many people do you think hunt that are your age? Because I don't think there's anybody. And I had a teacher approach me when my son was in grade 10, and he had talked about, so the firearms laws or something had come up, and And he came up to my son afterwards and met me in the parking lot and said, you know, my fondest memories as a kid were walking in the Laurentians in Quebec, grouse hunting with my grandfather.
Mhm.
The smells I still remember, and the birds and the whole part of that. You know, yeah. So I really, you know, I feel really appreciative of the connection that you've done, and thanks for all that you've done for what is, you know, a sport that I hope to expose to more folks. And I said it to Brian at Burkhardt. I said, you know, I think that anyone can use a traditional bow and hunt with it, but I just said it's not for everyone either. And I think it's that patience process in a lot of cases too.
First, this afternoon before we hooked up, I'm working on a piece for Montana Outdoors. It's our Fish, Wildlife, and Parks magazine, which is just excellent. And they asked me to do a thing about traditional bow hunting in Montana. Of course, I was happy to do it. And you took the words out of my mouth because I had to say, this isn't for everyone. You know, you've got to be willing to put in time. You've got to acquire a lot of skills that are kind of unique. And but most importantly, you have to be willing to walk out of the woods with no dead animal. I mean, that's part of it, you know. We are deliberately limiting our means of take, as Jay Massey put it once. I miss Jay and I miss Fred.
Yeah, right. Yeah. The first duck, and just to close out real quick, the first duck I ever got was a Drake wood duck. It was an immature Drake. And I was still hunting this little creek by our house. And I'd missed a couple, and this flock of wood ducks peeled around me, and I started squealing at them. And three of them just turned on a dime and pitched in 20 yards away in the water. And I hauled off and shot, and I hit it. And it
Hey,
dispatched pretty quickly. It was actually a bear razorhead that was never recovered. I don't know where it went. It was in the water somewhere. And I waited out up to my neck, like perilous waiting to get that bird. It was like the great. It still stands out, I think, as one of the craziest. I remember bringing that duck home to my dad and my mom, thinking I was probably 16 at the time. You know, and I said, my mom was like, "Oh, it's a duck. Get it out of here. Go take care of it." But you don't understand. I got it with my bow,
oh
and then
yeah.
way out into the water. And then she's like, "What?" That was when it stopped. I got her. I got her interest pretty quickly with that. You waited up, no waders on, and it's the end of October up to your neck. You know,
Yeah.
yeah. I killed my duck hunting pursuits for a couple weeks with that story.
Well, listen, Grant, really good to visit with you. I appreciate what you're doing up there. A lot of friends in Canada, these historical ties to Canada. I love the country. And I really appreciate what you're doing and the emphasis you're putting on these intangible aspects of hunting that we've been talking about. So keep it up, please.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Don. Well, I hope to chat again soon.
Gotta take care of my dog now.
Okay.
Max, come here. You want to be on a video? Come here. Come here, buddy. He's better looking than I am. He's tired. Come here, Max. Get up here. Almost. I should have the puppy here. She'd be eating the computer. Okay, take care.
Cheers.